Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Amanda. I'm a pastoral intern here at St. Paul and St. Andrew, and this is my first time preaching up front, so I brought a visual aid with me. I don't know if you can zoom in on the live stream if that's a possibility. This is a mug that was gifted to myself and some other members of our pastoral team here by my fellow intern, Andrea. Thank you very much. Also my fellow Michigander. Thank you very much. And you probably can't see it from where you're seated, but it's Dolly Parton on a mug. And it says, St. Dolly the Beloved, which is how we revere her here at St. Paul and St. Andrew as a saint. And etched above her head in stained glass, it says, if I hadn't been a woman, I'd be a drag queen for sure. So I'm going to place that right here. So if you get bored, you can just admire the art. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about why I really got turned on to Dolly Parton. It happened kind of recently in 2019 when a podcast called Dolly Parton's America took the United States, or at least my demographic, by storm. I think I listened to the third episode of that podcast at least 4 times and lovingly forced multiple members of my family and friend group to listen to it as well, and this is why. It's a deep dive account of Dolly Parton's relationship with the famed Porter Wagoner, who in 1967 led the most famous country music television show of that time. And if y'all remember, 1967 was an era where music television was really big. That year, he invited 21-year-old singer-songwriter Dolly Parton to join him as his sidekick on the show, and they soon became a massive hit. Porter and Dolly were unstoppable. You can hear the creative and playful chemistry in their banter and in their music from that time. They performed together for a decade. But over that decade, as Dolly ascended in talent and fame, Porter grew protective and defensive. Behind the scenes, their relationship grew contentious. They had incredible creative chemistry, but the more that Dolly got ahead, the more Porter tried to obscure her and also to own and receive the revenue that she was creating. It became clear that Dolly needed to get out of this partnership. And fascinatingly to me, Dolly handled getting out of the toxicity in a remarkable and a really different way. She set out to do her thing with gusto, and she did it without, at least publicly, to any of our knowledge, displaying hatred, disdain, or bad-mouthing. On the contrary, Dolly was enduringly generous to Porter up until his very death and continues to be generous to this day. True to her genius, Dolly wrote some of her most popular tunes in the context of the Dolly-Porter relationship. And do you know how she broke out of the partnership? Famously, Dolly walked into Porter's office one day with her guitar, sat down, and sang to him her new composition, I Will Always Love You, which you all know perhaps from Whitney Houston's rendition in The Bodyguard. You know it, right? And I will always love you. Yes, that part. Yes, yes, yes. Beautiful. Fantastically done. Beautiful choir here this morning. And Porter looked right at Dolly and he said, well, that's the best song you ever wrote. And she looked right back at him and said, I wrote it about you. And then she walked out of his office and out of their partnership. Dolly left Porter in the late 1970s, a moment when the divorce rate in the U.S. was doubling. Change was happening in relationships, especially relationships between women and men. And this meant that Dolly, whether by coincidence or not, was giving voice to an historical moment of collective social rebellion. Speaking from the depths of her unique personal pain, Dolly was giving voice to what it felt like to be a vulnerable person saying, bye. In her own way, Dolly gently communicated, "You tried to protect me, but I don't need you to do that for me anymore. I am not afraid to leave a relationship that does not have room for me to be who I truly am. Times are going to be different now." And when I read the scripture for today, all of Jesus' snappy retorts to Herod that Pat so beautifully read for us, I thought of Dolly's creative way of leaving Porter Wagner. Here, right in the middle of the Gospel of Luke, we have a tipping point. Jesus is not trying to hide or run away. Herod enters the scene, and slightly confusingly, this is not the same Herod from Jesus' birth, which if y'all were here for the pageant at St. Paul and St. Andrew, Micah gave an Academy Award-winning performance from that very balcony of Herod I. This is now his successor, Herod Antipas. But the point is, it's a Roman ruler. He's presiding over Galilee and the Jewish community as a Roman ruler. And to just put it bluntly, Herod is a bully. So we're reminded here of Jesus' relationship to the Roman Empire, which has been contentious since birth, as his parents had to flee the country to protect him. But here in chapter 13, in Jerusalem, in the temple, Jesus is no longer a baby. In fact, in these chapters, in the middle of the Gospel of Luke, we watch Jesus fully coming into his own power and ministry, the way I think Dolly did when she realized she no longer needed some kind of male chaperone in order to write massively popular music. Perhaps this is why a friend of mine at Union, hearing that I was preaching on the Gospel of Dolly this morning, said, "Oh, Jesus?" But back to the point, like Dolly, Jesus is deeply connected to his gifts, to his particular purpose. And from his knowledge of his gifts, when someone suggests that Jesus kowtow to Herod, Jesus claps back with a retort. "Go and tell that fox for me, listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I'll finish my work." In other words, excuse me, I'm busy. "See," Jesus says to the people of Jerusalem who bother with Herod's shenanigans, "your house is left to you." Of course, Dolly Porter and Jesus Herod is not exactly the same. But what they do have in common is standing up to a bully. When Jesus was a baby, his parents did the right thing. They fled out of Herod's grasp. But here in Luke 13, we witness a Jesus that is no longer a vulnerable child. He's speaking back to the same forces of domination that forced his parents into a decision that no parent wants to make, to leave home, something we're hearing about all the time right now. In this scene, I imagine Jesus drawing himself up to his full stature as he says, "Go and tell that fox for me." Jesus here is coming into an awareness of the destiny that is uniquely his, not despite the time, place, and parents to whom he was born, but because of them. This moment is the moment when the child who has been bullied and shoved around and told that he doesn't deserve to be seen or to be in Jerusalem straightens his spine, looks the bully in the eye, and says, "Not me and not today. I'm done being controlled. I'm done moving around this city being followed and threatened. I'm done moving around this city being catcalled. I'm done moving around this city being stopped at traffic lights or for made-up infractions because of the color of my skin. Not today, Herod. I got people to heal. I got songs to sing. I'm out." Of course, it's not as simple as straightening your spine and giving a bully a good one-liner. We all know that the clap back is rarely the end of the story. Clapping back, more often than not, runs the risk of putting an already vulnerable person in even greater danger, even as this works to empower the vulnerable person and the people around them. Clapping back rebelling. It's never the end of the story, but it's a crucial tipping point in it. And I think that's how it ends up here in the middle of the Gospel of Luke. Appropriate for the season that we're in here, Lent, Luke is getting us ready for the events that lead up to Holy Week. Jesus actually uses the words, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord," which we'll hear in a few weeks on Palm Sunday. You knew I wasn't going to leave Dolly, right? So we're going to go back to her. For her part, Dolly writes about the tipping point moment of walking out of Porter Wagner's office after singing "I Will Always Love You" as the moment in which she, quote, won her freedom. She writes this in her autobiography. "As I left his office and began to drive to my home, it began to rain. And so did I. I began to cry. Not so much because of the loss, but because of the pain that almost always comes with change. It has a sad kind of freedom. Then I began to sing a song to myself. It's been a long, dark night, and I've been waiting for the morning. It's been a long, hard fight, but I see a brand new day a-dawning. I can see the light of a clear blue morning. And I swear to you on my life," Dolly says, "that as I said that, the sky cleared up, it stopped raining, and before I got home, I had entirely written the song, 'Light of a Clear Blue Morning.'" Dolly says, "It was like God saying, 'Okay, you're free to go now, so just make the most of it.'" And Dolly says, "That was the first song of my freedom." So walking out is not the whole story, but it's a pivotal moment in Dolly's understanding of her own freedom, and one that connects Dolly to the women of her time who were rising up, rebelling, moving away from things that were not good for them all over the country. And so too, Jesus invites us in this passage today lovingly into a revolution that doesn't hurt us. He's exasperated in this passage because he wants us to know that we can have both love and power. We can be both gentle and strong. God's reign doesn't have to be all hierarchical and violent to be powerful. Listen to how Jesus compares himself to Herod. Jesus characterizes Herod in this passage as a fox, and then he compares the role of the fox to the characterization of himself as a hen. So to be quite honest, I think foxes are very cute, but for the purpose of this passage, I think Jesus is using the image of a fox as a teaching tool. What do we know about the age-old relationship between the fox and the hen house? That foxes come to take the eggs and the chicks, right? The fox moves undercover, he connives, he feeds himself through stealing someone else's work, what someone else has birthed. But Jesus is not that kind of leader. Jesus portrays himself as incredibly maternal. A hen who is at once deeply nurturing, soft, and gentle, and also fiercely protects her vulnerable brood. And y'all know we're the brood, right? The fragile part. So in the same way that Dolly shows us, you can both claim your independent freedom as an empowered woman and not resort to rancor and toxicity. Jesus is showing us that there is a way to spark a revolution in world order. There is a way to be in the kingdom that is sweet and gentle and nurturing and safe and fiercely powerful, irreversibly transformative. This is the revolution of Easter that Jesus is foreshadowing. Jesus' social gospel, that whole turn your cheek business, is not about being timid. It's about being brave and being maternal and fierce. Like Dolly showed us with Porter, acting in this way illuminates how small and weak the opponent really is. And this, I believe, is how claiming your freedom relates to revolution. One person choosing freedom for oneself in one moment becomes an invitation to plunge whole into the revolution of transformative liberation that is God's kingdom in the whole world. As you realize your particular freedom, you begin to witness how your liberation is bound up in the liberation of others. We know that wisdom from Indigenous Australian activist Lila Watson. Or, in the words of another community-rooted woman activist I adore, a Barnard College grad. I believe there are some Barnard College grads I see, yes, and they're very good. Grace Lee Boggs says, in transforming yourself, you transform the world. Now, let's not get it twisted. Transform yourself to transform the world can start to sound like God helps those who help themselves. And God helps those who help themselves is bad theology. It is a wicked bootstrap mentality lie meant to disguise the fact that the scam is structural. Heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, monolithic power, unchecked greed, these are systems that hurt all of us, y'all, and we're not going to get out of them independently. Transform yourself to transform the world is a key. It means that the intersection of how and where and when we each are in history is special. Just as God came into history in one moment in time, each of us is placed in this moment in time. Born to specific parents, we are born to a specific culture and to struggles and to sufferings and to joys. In the Hebrew Bible passage that MC read so beautifully today, we heard about Abram, how he chose in his time and in his context to believe and to trust God. Abram counted the stars as an act of freedom. It is in our concrete realities that we are presented with specific choices. And it is in making specific choices that we choose freedom. The rebellion of these individual choices fuels our collective revolution. In this season of Lent now, Christians are invited to adopt a spiritual discipline: fasting, praying, creating space, choosing a particular way to make a holy Lent. And in light of today's gospel, I wonder if we might consider our Lenten disciplines as rituals of rebellion. Because how we choose to spend or not spend our time each day is an opportunity to practice our freedom. We can ritualize rebellion against the metaphorical foxes in our world, the forces of empire and oppression and domination. Like Abram, we believe. Like Jesus, we act out of that belief in our time. We spend our time in a way that brings us closer to God. It's these interlocking acts of independent freedom that propel us toward interdependent liberation. And you all at St. Paul and St. Andrew teach me a lot about this. Kate Baum here at SPSA taught me to celebrate heroic moments in our days. Her example, which really hit home for me, and also my mom is watching on the live stream, and I think she's going to be so excited, Kate, when she hears this. Kate's example was, it's like letting the alarm go off and getting out of bed immediately. That's your heroic moment for the day. It means choosing to do what you know is going to make you feel good and let that fuel the rest of the day. Amen, right? That's a word. In her Lenten devotional just a few weeks ago, Melanie Baker here at SBSA wrote about finding a moment to run every day as her practice of liberation. She said, "The act of putting on my shoes and stepping outside of the door freed me from whatever troubles I was wrestling with. It wasn't that they would go away. It was that the act of pounding the pavement helped put them in perspective." You all know what this feels like. For me, a similar way to free myself from the forces of empire and workaholism is choosing rest. It's about honoring my body's needs as one of those fragile eggs in the mother hen's nest. I ask myself, what would my mother hen want for me when I'm tired? And I claim my freedom, often, my friends, by taking a nap. Or asking for an extension on a due date instead of just working through so I can make that deadline. Of course, this is not something everyone in every circumstance can do, but it is something that I, in my particular situation as a student at this moment in time, have the power and the choice to do. I'll close by sharing one very concrete way that in my life I make independent choices for freedom, and how that independent choice connects me to our interdependent liberation. It happens for me when I show up for PJ prayers on Tuesday mornings. This is a practice that brings me closer to God. Independently, I set my alarm, and independently, I have a heroic moment choosing not to hit snooze, but I log into Zoom. And you all know I couldn't do it independently myself if we weren't all there interdependently. Thank God that on Tuesday mornings I choose not to snooze, and neither do you. I enter the Zoom room, and Lee always plays a song in the background as our faces pop onto the screen. Alicia and Kate, Andrea and Lee and Donna and Karen and Peggy and Charles and Julia and Nancy, and on you show up. I remember one crisp fall morning this year as your faces popped onto the screen for us to pray together, and I heard from the speakers of my computer Dolly Parton sing, "It's been a long, long time since I've known the taste of freedom." And those clinging vines, they had me bound. Well, I don't need them. Oh, I've been like a captured eagle, and you know an eagle's born to fly. Now that I have won my freedom, like an eagle, I am eager for the sky.